Gold plating is that this cup of tea, which is in a paper cup, I will give it to you in a silver cup, and the 1 rupee price will rise to 100 rupees, not because of the tea, but because of the silver that is around it. And I'm not drinking the silver, I'm drinking the cup of tea. But here I actually spent 100 rupees because the silver is, costlier. So there is no inflation in cost, but there has been gold plating. So, a girl was looking very beautiful in the jeans that she was wearing, but then you bought her a $20,000 designer dress. She still looked the same, but she had been gold plated by now because she is wearing a $20,000 dress. So that's the difference between cost inflation and gold plating. Now, the reason I'm explaining this to you is because a lot of confusion has been created on this. Some people say that gold plating, that will be my last point, gold plating does not help Reliance. And yes, gold plating does not help Reliance because they've actually spent $100, maybe useless $100, but they still have spent $100 and they deserve a 2.5 times that investment multiple. The government should have stopped them from putting this in a silver cup. They should have said that, look, paper cup is fine, but they did stop them, it's not their fault, so they deserve 250 back. But if they price this cup of 1 rupee is 10 rupees, 9 rupees was never spent. So they don't deserve a multiple on those 9 rupees. So that is cost inflation. Okay. And they are guilty of both. Okay. And they've again fudged these two to get away with one. Okay. So they're guilty of both, but just to tell you what the difference is. Also, as I told you, because of this merger of various phases, another thing that happened is that they never relinquished, they never completed the work program that they had committed to, either under the initial development plan or under the addendum to the initial development plan. But not having completed their work, they also did not relinquish even a square inch of the area. So they kept that entire 7,300 square kilometers with them. So much so that in the production sharing contract, there is a drop dead date that if by 10 years you haven't done, you've not actually started producing from that area, none of that area belongs to you. Okay. So that 10 years are now over by another, we are in the 10 plus 2 years already. And last week, the government, on its last 3 weeks of being in power, has floated a cabinet note, which luckily has to go to the election commission right now because of the moral code of conduct. They produced a cabinet note retrospectively giving them an extension of another 3 or 4 years so that this can continue into 2014-15. Okay? And this field D1, D3 will be fully exhausted by 2015 incident. But to regularize what has what was wrongly done, all those milestones were not followed, the government has actually floated a cabinet note last week so that just before they go out of power, all this extension is provided. So nothing has been relinquished back. Another very smart thing, and this is the gold plating part of the thing, Reliance never produced what it promised to produce because there was no gas to begin with. Remember I told you that they inflated the reserve so that they could get leeway to spend more, whatever else. But very intelligently, they created the infrastructure. Gas comes out of the fields, but you have to collect the gas and bring it onshore. And then you have to pipe that gas to the end consumer. So that entire infrastructure has been created for the higher volume that they had promised. This was almost like insurance for them because no matter, even if government forces them to relinquish the area, whoever finds the gas in the future, you're not going to duplicate that infrastructure again. So whomever you give that field to will have to deal with Reliance because that infrastructure already exists. So that was the gold plating part, where they built infrastructure that was not supposed to be, or not required to be built. This is like the silver cup that was not required was given, or the designer dress that was not really required because the girl remained the same. If she didn't improve because of the designer dress. So, improve or become worse either way. So basically, so you have infrastructure in place for a much higher level of production. Okay. So whoever takes this field in the future, if at all they succeed in taking it, they will still have to deal with Reliance. So they ensured themselves that. And the second, because the reserves were never there, the production started declining rapidly, and from a peak of 63 mmcm, 68 mmcmd that they produced for a short period, they are today producing only about 10 mmcm. Okay. And the original 3.3 TCF has come true, and now they are saying that there was a geological problem, so that's why those reserves were not there. And but not having relinquished the other areas, surrounding areas where there is gas, there is known gas, which they have not relinquished. Meantime, the price has gone up from 420 to 840. They have essentially hoarded gas, not in the field that they were operating, but they have hoarded gas in adjoining fields which they should have relinquished, which they have not relinquished. So they will now extract that gas and sell it at even a higher price. And because they did not have the expertise to do that, in the meantime, BP came on board. BP, they sold 30% of their share to BP, and they collected another $7 billion for selling 30% of the stake to BP. And you can imagine, BP is one of the world's, one of the best-known companies in the world, and they were not kids to put in $7 billion if there was no gas there, but they could not recover those $7 billion. So that happened. And there is no provision in the PSC, unfortunately, on how to account. This is known in the trade as farming. When you sell your share to somebody else, there is no provision in the PSC on how to count this receipt that you get through farming in your equity towards that investment multiple. Remember, they can only get that investment multiple and no more. Okay? After that, they only get 15% of gas in their profit share. So I've explained that thing to you, and in the meantime, the Rangarajan formula came about, and the Rangarajan formula actually effectively raises the price to $8.40. And this is really the second last point that I would explain to you. There are many things wrong with the Rangarajan formula, which I have written about, and it's widely quoted by many people. But let me explain something very fundamental to you, which you will understand. They talk in terms of a net back price, and the net back concept itself is erroneous, but I will not go into that. What the Rangarajan formula does, I have tried to explain to you, and why it delivers a $8.40 price, I will explain to you briefly. The Rangarajan formula first tries to estimate the global weighted average price of gas. Remember, I began by telling you that there is no international price of gas. Okay. But the Rangarajan formula tries to estimate that. So conceptually that is a problem, but let's not get into concept. How does it do that? It takes the weighted, volume weighted price of various countries to say that, and averages them. You understand volume weighted? Volume weighted, very simply stated, is that if he produces 10 units of gas, and he produces 20 units of gas, he sells it for $5 and you sell it for $10. Okay? So the volume weighted is average price of gas I will get is 10 into 5, because he got 10 into 5, $50 for his gas, and he got $100 for his gas, 20 into 10, $200 for his gas. So I will take price into volume, and divide by V1 plus V2, which is the total volume. So that will give me the volume weighted average of the price. Okay, if I took a simple average, I would take 10 and 20 and come to 50. But if you do what the volume weighted, you will come to a different number. That number will be, as I said, 100 plus 200, 300 divided by 10 plus 10, 20, which will be some, not 5, no, 10 plus whatever the number is, 5 plus 5, it will be different. It will be different from that number. So you weight it with the volume. In a simple average, you take a simple average of the price. So it takes that volume weighted average of the global prices, And for that, it uses, for the US, the North American market, there is something called a Henry Hub price, which is quoted for next day delivery and up to 120 months forward. So it takes the Henry Hub price next day delivery. Okay. But it prices all North American gas at Henry Hub prices. Okay. The truth is that the Canadian price is lower than the Henry Hub price, and the Mexican price is lower than the Henry Hub price. But it uses the Henry Hub price for everybody. The second problem is that a Henry Hub is a point in a state called Louisiana. Okay, all the gas is not produced in Louisiana, and all the gas is not sold in Louisiana. So depending on the price of the gas and depending on the market conditions, the Henry Hub price includes a transportation element of the gas, okay, which can vary from about 40 cents to about $1.20, depending on the market conditions, but it does include a price component. Just to give you a sense of proportion, the Henry Hub price for the year 2012, average over the year, volume weighted again, was $2.76 per million BTUs. The corresponding hub price in Canada was $2.44 per million BTUs. And 276 itself contained about 45 cents of transportation gas. So, but he uses 276 for Canada, for Mexico, and weights that with that. Then similarly, there is a thing called the National Balancing Point in UK, which prices gas for Western Europe. There is Western Europe, there is former Soviet Union, and then there is Russia. Okay, so that's the state of Europe. So the National Balancing Point is a price which is computed from several sources. It includes North Sea gas, it includes piped gas all the way from Russia, it includes also 20 to 30% of LNG. Okay. And again, just to give you a sense of proportion, in 2012, when the Henry Hub price was 276, the National Balancing Point was 980. Okay. Now, despite the fact that this price was 4 times higher, and 4 times higher for good reasons, because it included some LNG, which I told you can be 2 to 10 times costlier than gas. It included Russian gas, which was transported over long distances in pipelines. The cost of transportation itself was $6 to $7 per million BTUs. It included all that, but the Rangarajan committee chose to use that as the price of gas. Okay? And weights that with the volume of consumption in Western Europe, former Soviet Union, and Russia. Now, the Russian price of gas is a fraction of the National Balancing Point. And the price of gas in the former Soviet Union is a fraction of the National Balancing Point. And even in Western Europe, the National Balancing Point is not the price of gas in each of these countries, but he uses that one because it's a high number for everybody. Okay. And then he uses the Japan's LNG and nets it back to something called a producer price, which is conceptually wrong, but it adds that. And importantly, it forgets that there's a Latin American market for gas which is cheaper. It forgets that there's an African market for gas which is much cheaper. He forgets that there's an entire Middle Eastern market for gas which is completely dirt cheap. So all of that is excluded. So they only take these markets, they exclude Indonesia where gas is cheap, they exclude Malaysia where gas is cheap, they exclude Pakistan where gas is cheap, they exclude China where gas, none of this is included. So net impact of that is, by selectively taking some, they include North America, they include Europe, and they include Japan, and this gives a very high average price of gas for the world for the reasons I've just explained. Then they take for India, that's part one of the formula. For India, they only take LNG price of India. Now LNG consumption in India is 0.6% of the global gas consumption, 0.6%. But they take the so-called netback price of LNG, and then so far they were taking volume-weighted averages, but between the world volume-weighted average price, which is incorrectly estimated and highly estimated, and the Indian netback price of LNG, they now take a simple average. So by doing this, what they do is they give LNG a weightage of something like 50% here, and because there's LNG in the other price, the effective weightage of LNG is almost 65% in that formula. Now, two brilliant minds, Rangarajan and your own Ramdas, Ram Prasad Sengupta, were members of this committee. Now, whatever they may not or may not have understood about the energy market, I can pardon them for that because they were not energy specialists. But at least as professors of economics, they understood mathematics of addition and subtraction and division. Now, I refuse to believe that they did not know, or this was a loss of judgment, that they did not know that they were making these stupid mistakes in which will only inflate the price of gas. My own personal sense is that they knew that what the price of gas has to be. 420 is, everybody knows what that means. And if you go to UP, 840 means twice as much sharper. Okay, so they knew that 840 has to be given now because it's twice as much this thing, and they somehow made the formula deliver 840. Okay, so this is how legitimate our professors are. Incidentally, I am a student of Rangarajan, as some of you may be students of Ram Prasad Sengupta. And then, of course, the last point I want to make is that this Kelkar committee came up. And even though there's a dissent note even on the Kelkar committee, they very stupendously argue that, and they use the word gold plating, and I agree gold plating does not help the contractor, but they completely forget the inflation in cost. So they say that this doesn't help the contractor at all, which is a statement which I can prove blatantly to anybody. I mean, essentially what Reliance has done is that by inflating the cost, by the time they recover the gas that is existing there will be no gas left for the government to claim 85% share. So government will get 85% share of zero, and 85% of zero unfortunately is still zero. No matter which, Ram Prasad Sengupta cannot change it and Mr. Rangarajan cannot change it. So that's essentially what happened in this story, and I think I have taken more of the time than I intended to, but it's a complex area. I don't know how much you understood, but I'll be happy to take questions if you have any.